Hello and welcome to my channel, Miscellaneous Sea Serpent. Today I've got a fun little illustration for you, a watercolor painting. Alright, let's dive in. Okay, so I'm going to start off by talking about the materials that I used. For the paper, I used the Artist's Loft colored watercolor paper. Then I used some Reeves watercolors, Winsor and Newton Cotman watercolors, and I used another kind. I don't know what the brand was, but they were really bad. I didn't enjoy using them at all. I had lots of problems with them. And I started out using those watercolors, and then I switched over to the other two brands. But yeah, those ones that I used at first were really streaky. They left weird textures on the page that I had to deal with. So fortunately, I was able to cover up the whole problem with the other watercolors, but it was a challenge for that. So there was that. Then the other materials I used were the Higgins Black Magic ink. That's what I was using for inking, as well as my dip pens, which are Speedball if you'd like to know about that. And then lastly, my Jelly Roll gel ink pen, white gel pen. So I used that at the end. Those were the materials that I used. I'll list them in the description down below as well. And so now I'd like to talk a little bit about the artwork that I'm doing here. So there was quite a lot of difficulty with the first paint that I was using. Fortunately, I was able to cover up all the issues that I had, but the only problem with that was that it resulted in the piece being overall a lot darker than I had intended. So it seems kind of ominous, actually, like really somber, just because I had to add extra dark colors to it to be able to cover up that first layer that didn't work for me. So that was a little unfortunate there. I would have preferred it to be a little lighter, especially on the place where I painted the tabletop. That was going to be my lightest light, really, of the whole piece. And then I had to add like 2 or so layers on top of it. So that didn't work out, but that's okay. I really like how the rest of the piece turned out, so I'm still pretty happy with it. So then I also wanted to talk about the inking process. I was inking with my dip pen and just some ink. It was my first time trying out the Black Magic ink, and it worked really well for me. I enjoyed it. It's really thin, which works really well for the dip pens, especially because you keep going until it's dried out, but because the ink was so thin, it didn't dry out often, so it didn't clog up, which was really convenient, and that made it really fun to work with and easy. It was a little difficult doing the dip pen for especially the places where I had to do lots of curves. Dip pens don't do curves well at all, so I had to really rotate like my whole body around the artwork to be able to point the pen in the right direction, because they really only go in one direction, and then after that you just have to maneuver the rest of your body. So that was a little bit challenging, and I picked a piece with lots of curves in it. But in the end, I fixed up a couple of the mistakes that I made, and I'm really happy with how the line work turned out. I think it's cute. And then also I wanted to talk about the fun idea I got for having a teapot, having an octopus in the teapot. It was really cute. I was reading a book about octopuses, and one of the topics, or one of the stories that the book had about octopuses was that there was this one octopus that had sort of crawled around inside the boat, and the researchers eventually found it hiding out in a teapot. And I just thought that was so cute, to find a little octopus hiding in there. So I wanted to take my inspiration from that, and I drew it. And then I added the teacup as well. Needed something else to fill the space, and then in that teacup I put a starfish. So another little ocean creature hanging out in a teacup. So that was fun. That was a cute idea, I thought. So then I also wanted to talk a little bit more about octopuses, or octopods. Those are both options for plurals. Octopi is not correct because that's a Latin suffix, but octopus is a Greek term. So you have to have a Greek suffix, or because it's sort of been turned into English, octopuses is also correct technically. So octopuses or octopods. So yeah, I wanted to talk about octopus cognition and how cool their brains are, because they are really very different from us, and their brains are totally different. But still, they are so very intelligent and smart in different ways than us, and also in some similar ways. And so I thought it would be an interesting thing to talk about here. So one of the things that I found when researching octopuses was that most of their neurons, so like most of their brain, is actually in their arms. So it's like almost double the neurons that are in the brain are actually in the arms, which is really interesting. So that like they do a lot of thinking, and their arms do things by themselves because they have these neurons, which I find just fascinating. And then along with that kind of is that the octopuses, they taste things with their arms, which so they reach out and they use their suckers, and then whatever they touch, they can actually taste through them. Which is really kind of cool. Taste with their arms, but it makes sense because they eat with they don't really have a mouth. They have a beak that they use to sort of tear the food up, but there's no place for like a sort of tongue organ or anything. So they taste with their arms, and taste is still really important to them to be able to tell if something's safe to eat or not. So they still have to have a way to do it. So it's sort of a cool solution to that problem. So then another thing about why they're so smart is because when you think about it, the octopuses have a lot of things to think about. Especially they're well known for being able to camouflage themselves with their color changing, and they can change the texture of their skin and stuff. So they have to have some way to be able to control that, and also be able to sense the environment around them to be able to determine what's the best solution to the problem they have currently. So they have to be able to camouflage themselves, which takes a lot of brain power. So that's one reason for having a well-developed brain. They also hunt lots of things, which I found interesting. And then for everything that they hunt, they have to have a specialized approach to catching them. So they in order to be successful, they have to sort of be able to think through their process and figure out what they need to do, which is really, really advanced for, especially for mollusks, which is what octopuses are. They're cephalopods, which is in the larger group of the mollusks. And then also what they're able to do kind of along hunting is they're able to predict the actions of others. So sort of figure out what other animals and people are thinking about to be able to respond to them. So I found that really, really fascinating, that they were able to sort of do this when most animals can't really figure out and understand what's happening around them and what other animals are doing independently and what they're going to do, which definitely helps the octopuses in hunting and also in staying alive, not being eaten themselves. Yeah, so those are just a couple of the things that I found really interesting about octopuses, octopods. So yeah, and I hope you enjoyed my artwork for this week. And thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful day, and live life respectfully. Bye.